It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed for Karoline Martinez. She was sitting at her desk in the busy newsroom, drinking her third cup of coffee and going through emails like any other day. The coffee was getting cold, and she was thinking about grabbing lunch when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the medical center on Riverside Drive. Something big happened last night. Come alone. Karoline stared at the message for a long moment. In her 15 years as a reporter, she had received hundreds of tips like this. Most of them led nowhere, but sometimes they led to the biggest stories of her career. She had learned to trust her gut, and right now her gut was telling her this might be different. She grabbed her camera bag and car keys without saying anything to her editor. If this turned out to be nothing, she would be back in an hour with no one knowing she had left. But if it was something important, she wanted to be the first one there. The drive to the medical center took 20 minutes through busy city traffic. Karoline had been to this place before while working on other stories. It was one of those private facilities where rich and important people went when they needed medical care, but wanted to avoid the regular hospitals where reporters might be, waiting. As she pulled into the parking lot across the street, Karoline immediately noticed something unusual. There were way too many black cars for a normal day at a small medical center. She counted at least 6 expensive-looking vehicles, all parked in perfect rows near the main entrance. Her reporter instincts kicked in right away. She parked her car where she could see the building clearly but stay hidden behind some trees. Taking out her camera with the long lens, she started watching through the viewfinder. At first, nothing happened. A few regular patients walked in and out, but nothing that would explain all those black cars. Then she saw them. Men in dark suits with earpieces, standing near the entrance and walking around the parking lot. They were trying to look casual, but Karoline had covered enough political events to recognize security personnel when she saw them. These were definitely government agents, probably Secret Service. Her heart started beating faster. Secret Service only showed up for current, or former presidents and their families. But which one? And why were they at a medical center instead of a hospital? Karoline settled in for a long wait. She had learned patience during her years as a reporter. Sometimes the best stories required sitting in uncomfortable places for hours, waiting for something to happen. She kept her camera ready and watched every person who came and went from the building. Around 2 in the afternoon, things started getting interesting. More security agents appeared, and they began clearing the area around a side entrance that most people probably did not even notice. Karoline adjusted her camera and focused on that door. Something important was about to happen. She did not have to wait long. The side door opened, and out walked someone she recognized immediately. It was Barack Obama, the former president of the United States. But something was wrong with this picture. Obama looked different than she had ever seen him before. His usually confident walk seemed slower and more careful. His shoulders were slightly hunched, and he kept one hand on the arm of the man walking beside him. That man was wearing a white coat and carrying a medical bag. Clearly a doctor. Karoline started taking pictures as fast as she could while staying hidden. Through her camera lens, she could see Obama's face more clearly. He looked tired and worried. This was not the calm, collected leader she had photographed at dozens of political events. This was a man who seemed genuinely concerned about something. The small group walked quickly to one of the black cars. Obama got into the back seat, still moving carefully. The doctor got in beside him, and within seconds, the car was driving away with the others following behind. Karoline sat in her car for several minutes trying to process what she had just witnessed. Why would a former president be at a private medical center in the middle of the day? Why did he look so worried? And why were they using a side entrance instead of the main door? She decided to approach the building and see if she could learn anything more. Walking casually across the street, she went to the main reception desk and smiled at the woman behind the counter. "Hi there," Karoline said in her friendliest voice. "I think I might have seen someone I know leaving here earlier. Former President Obama? I work for the newspaper and was wondering if there might be some kind of official statement." The receptionist's face went pale. "I'm sorry, but I cannot discuss any patients or visitors. We have very strict privacy policies here." The woman's reaction told Karoline everything she needed to know. Obama had definitely been there, and whatever had happened was serious enough to make the staff nervous about talking. Karoline thanked the receptionist and left the building. As she walked back to her car, she noticed something else interesting. There were still 2 security agents standing near the parking lot, watching everyone who came and went. They were being discreet about it, but they were definitely still there. Back in her car, Karoline looked through the photos she had taken. They were good quality and clearly showed Obama leaving the medical center with what appeared to be his personal physician. His body language in every photo suggested he was dealing with something serious. She drove back to the newsroom with her mind racing. This could be a huge story, but she needed to be careful. Health information about anyone, including former presidents, was private and sensitive. She could not just publish photos and speculation without having real facts. At her desk, Karoline started making phone calls to her contacts in Washington. She had built relationships with people in government offices, medical facilities, and security agencies over the years. If something significant had happened to Obama, someone would know about it. Her first few calls led nowhere. People either had not heard anything or were not willing to talk. But on her 5th call, to a friend who worked in a government medical office, she got a different response. "I cannot talk about this over the phone," her contact said quietly, "but meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street in an hour. Come alone." Karoline felt her excitement building. When sources wanted to meet in person instead of talking on the phone, it usually meant they had important information to share. An hour later, she was sitting in a corner booth at the coffee shop, waiting nervously. Her contact, a woman named Patricia who worked in medical records for a government agency, slid into the seat across from her. "What I'm about to tell you is completely off the record," Patricia said, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "You cannot use my name or say where you got this information." Karoline nodded. She understood the rules of working with confidential sources. "There have been some concerns about the former president's health," Patricia continued in a low voice. "Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that he has been seeing specialists quietly for the past few weeks." "What kind of concerns?" Karoline asked. "I cannot give you specifics, but there have been some incidents. Memory issues, confusion, headaches. His family and doctors wanted him to get thorough testing done privately before deciding what to do next." Karoline felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of information that could develop into a major story. But she also realized how sensitive it was. Obama's health was not just a personal matter. As a former president, his condition could have broader implications. "Is there going to be any official announcement?" she asked. Patricia shook her head. "Not unless they have to make one. They are hoping to handle everything quietly and privately. But if word gets out..." She did not finish the sentence, but Karoline understood. After Patricia left, Karoline sat in the coffee shop for another 30 minutes, thinking about what she had learned. She had photos of Obama leaving a medical center, and now she had confirmation from a reliable source that he was dealing with health issues. The question now was what to do with this information. As a journalist, she believed the public had a right to know about important developments involving their leaders. But as a human being, she also understood that everyone deserved privacy when dealing with health problems. She decided to do more research before making any decisions about publishing a story. She needed to find out exactly what kind of health issues Obama might be facing and whether they were serious enough to warrant public attention. Back at the newsroom, Karoline started researching medical conditions that might cause the symptoms Patricia had mentioned. Memory issues and confusion could be signs of many different problems, some serious and some not. As she worked late into the evening, Karoline kept thinking about the worried expression on Obama's face in her photos. Whatever was happening to him, it was clearly causing him and his family genuine concern. She also thought about her responsibility as a reporter. The public had trusted leaders like Obama with the highest office in the country. Did that mean they had a right to know about his health even after he left office? Or did former presidents deserve the same privacy as everyone else when it came to medical issues? These were the questions that would keep Karoline awake that night, as she tried to decide what to do with the biggest story that had landed in her lap in years. The next morning, Karoline woke up with a mission. She had barely slept, her mind racing with questions about what she had discovered. Over her morning coffee, she made a list of people she needed to contact. If Obama was really dealing with health issues, someone else had to know about it. Her first call was to Dr. Williams, a neurologist she had interviewed for previous health stories. They had developed a good working relationship over the years, and she trusted him to give her honest medical perspective without breaking any rules. Dr. Williams, this is Karoline from the newspaper. I need to ask you some general questions about health symptoms, nothing specific about any patient. Of course, Karoline. What can I help you with? She described the symptoms Patricia had mentioned, memory issues, confusion, and headaches, without saying who they might involve. Dr. Williams listened carefully before responding. Those symptoms could indicate several different conditions, he said thoughtfully. They might be related to stress, medication side effects, or more serious neurological issues. Without proper testing, it would be impossible to know for sure. Why are you asking? I'm working on a general story about health issues that affect people in high-stress jobs, Karoline replied, which was not exactly a lie. After hanging up, she realized she needed to learn more about Obama's recent activities. Had anyone noticed changes in his behavior? Were there any clues in his public appearances? Karoline spent the morning going through news footage and photos from Obama's recent public events. She watched videos of his speeches and interviews from the past 2 months, looking for anything unusual. At first, everything seemed normal. Obama appeared as confident and articulate as always. But then she noticed something in a video from 3 weeks ago. During a speech at a university, Obama paused for an unusually long time in the middle of a sentence. He looked confused for just a moment before continuing. Most people probably did not notice, but now that Karoline was looking for signs, it stood out. In another video from 2 weeks ago, she saw Obama reach for a water glass and miss it slightly, having to adjust his hand to grab it properly. Again, it was a small thing that most people would not pay attention to. These tiny moments started to paint a picture of someone who might be struggling with coordination or concentration issues. Around noon, Karoline got a call from Tony, a photographer, who worked for several major news organizations. Tony had covered many political events and knew Obama well. Hey Karoline, I heard you were asking around about health stories. I might have something interesting for you. They met at a small restaurant downtown where they could talk privately. Tony looked around nervously before leaning across the table. I was at a private event last week where Obama was speaking, Tony said quietly. Nothing unusual happened during his speech, but afterward I saw something weird. He was talking to some people and suddenly he stopped mid-conversation and looked completely lost. His wife had to come over and guide him away. Did anyone else notice? Karoline asked. I do not think so. It only lasted a few seconds, and Michelle handled it really smoothly. But I have been photographing that family for years, and I have never seen anything like it before. This was exactly the kind of information Karoline needed. Tony was a professional who knew the Obama family well, and his observation matched what she had already learned. After lunch, Karoline decided to reach out to some of her contacts in the Secret Service. These relationships were tricky because agents were not supposed to talk about the people they protected, but sometimes, if approached carefully, they might share general information. She called Agent Rodriguez, someone she had worked with on previous stories about presidential security. They had developed mutual respect over the years. Agent Rodriguez, I'm working on a story about how security details handle health emergencies. Can you give me some general information about protocols? What kind of health emergencies? He asked cautiously. Nothing specific. Just curious about how agents are trained to recognize when someone they are protecting might need medical attention. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment before responding. We receive extensive training on medical situations. We learn to watch for signs that someone might be having health problems, changes in behavior, coordination issues, confusion. When we notice something concerning, we have protocols for getting medical help quickly and discreetly. Have those protocols been used recently? Karoline asked, knowing she was pushing her luck. I cannot discuss specific situations, Rodriguez said firmly. But then he added, I will say that we take any health concerns very seriously, especially when they involve people who have served in high-stress positions for many years. The way he said it made Karoline think he was trying to tell her something without actually saying it. That afternoon, she got a call from Helen, a nurse who worked at the same medical center where she had seen Obama. Helen had helped Karoline with medical stories before and was usually willing to share general information. "Karoline, I cannot talk about specific patients, you know that, but I can tell you that we have had some very important visitors lately, and there has been extra security around here." "What kind of medical services have you been providing to these important visitors?" Karoline asked. "Neurological testing mostly, brain scans, memory tests, coordination evaluations. The kind of things we do when doctors are concerned about cognitive function." Helen's information confirmed what Karoline was starting to piece together. Obama had been at the medical center for neurological testing, which meant doctors were worried about his brain function. By late afternoon, Karoline had gathered enough information to understand the basic situation. Obama was experiencing symptoms that concerned his doctors enough to order extensive testing. The testing was being done privately to avoid public attention, but she still needed to know more about how serious the situation might be. Were these symptoms the beginning of a major health problem, or were they minor issues that could be easily treated? She decided to call Dr. Peterson, a specialist in age-related cognitive issues who had been helpful with previous stories. Dr. Peterson was known for being willing to discuss medical topics in general terms without violating patient privacy. "Dr. Peterson, I am researching a story about cognitive health in people who have held high-stress leadership positions. What kinds of issues do you typically see?" "Well, Karoline, people who have been under extreme stress for many years sometimes develop neurological symptoms later in life. The constant pressure can affect brain function over time." "What kinds of symptoms?" "Memory problems, difficulty concentrating, coordination issues, sometimes confusion or disorientation. These symptoms can be caused by many different things: stress, fatigue, medication interactions, or more serious conditions." "How do doctors usually handle these situations?" "The first step is always comprehensive testing to rule out serious conditions. Many times the symptoms are related to treatable issues like stress or sleep problems, but sometimes they indicate more significant neurological conditions that require ongoing management." This conversation helped Karoline understand that Obama's symptoms might not necessarily mean something terrible was happening, but they were serious enough to require medical attention and testing. As evening approached, Karoline realized she needed to be very careful about how she proceeded. She had enough information to write a story, but she also understood that she was dealing with someone's private health information. She decided to try one more approach. Instead of continuing to investigate secretly, maybe she should reach out to Obama's representatives directly. If there was a health issue that the public needed to know about, perhaps they would be willing to provide some official information. Karoline found the contact information for Obama's press secretary and sent a carefully worded email. She explained that she was working on a story about health issues affecting former political leaders and asked if they would be willing to provide any information or comments. Within an hour, she received a response asking her to call a specific number. When she dialed, a man answered who identified himself as Obama's communications director. "Ms. Martinez, we received your email. Can you be more specific about what kind of story you are working on?" Karoline took a deep breath. This was the moment where she had to decide how much to reveal about what she knew. "I have information suggesting that former President Obama may be dealing with some health concerns. I wanted to give your office the opportunity to provide accurate information before I continue my research." There was a long pause before the man responded. "I am going to need to discuss this with our team and get back to you. Can you give us 24 hours before you publish anything?" "I have not decided whether to publish anything yet," Karoline replied honestly. "I am still gathering information and trying to understand the situation." "We appreciate that. Someone will contact you tomorrow with more information." After hanging up, Karoline felt both excited and nervous. The response from Obama's office confirmed that there was indeed a health situation to discuss. but it also meant that she was now officially involved in a story that could have major implications. She spent the rest of the evening organizing all the information she had gathered. Photos of Obama leaving the medical center, confirmation from medical sources about neurological testing, observations from people who had noticed changes in his behavior, and now acknowledgement from his own representatives that there was something to discuss. The pieces were coming together to form a picture of a former president dealing with health issues that his team wanted to keep private. But Karoline still had not decided what her responsibility was as a journalist in this situation. As she prepared to leave the office, her phone rang one more time. It was Patricia, her original source from the government medical office. "Karoline, I heard you have been asking more questions about this situation. I need to warn you that there are people who really do not want this story to come out. Be careful about who you talk to and what you publish." "What kind of people?" Karoline asked. "The kind who have a lot of power and influence. This goes beyond just protecting one person's privacy. There are political implications here that you might not have considered." After Patricia hung up, Karoline sat in her car for several minutes thinking about this warning. She had assumed this was just a health story about a former president. But maybe there were bigger issues at play that she had not understood yet. Karoline barely slept that night. She kept thinking about Patricia's warning and what it could mean. When her alarm went off at 6 in the morning, she was already awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what she had gotten herself into over breakfast. She spread out all her notes and photos on her kitchen table. Looking at everything together, she realized she had enough material for a major news story. But the question that kept bothering her was whether she should actually write it. On one hand, she was a journalist. Her job was to find important stories and share them with the public. If a former president was having serious health problems, that seemed like something people had a right to know about. Obama had been one of the most powerful people in the world. Even after leaving office, his health could affect many things. On the other hand, she kept thinking about the worried look on Obama's face in her photographs. This was not just a story about a public figure. This was about a real person and his family dealing with something scary and personal. Around 8 in the morning, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she did not recognize. "Ms. Martinez, this is David Chen from former President Obama's office. We spoke yesterday about your story." Karoline grabbed a pen and notebook. "Yes, thank you for calling back. The former president would like to speak with you personally about this matter. Would you be available to meet with him this afternoon?" Karoline's heart started racing. In all her years as a reporter, she had never received a personal invitation to meet with a former president. This was both exciting and terrifying. "Of course," she managed to say. "Where and when?" "Can you come to his private office at 2 o'clock? I will send you the address. Please come alone, and do not bring any recording equipment." After hanging up, Karoline sat in her kitchen feeling overwhelmed. Obama wanted to meet with her personally. This meant her story was even bigger than she had realized. Former presidents did not meet with reporters unless something really important was happening. She spent the morning trying to prepare for the meeting. What should she ask him? How should she handle this conversation? She had interviewed many important people before, but never in a situation like this. At 1:30, Karoline arrived at the address David had sent her. It was a small office building in a quiet part of the city. She noticed the same black cars she had seen at the medical center parked outside. A security agent met her at the entrance and guided her to an elevator. They rode up to the 3rd floor in silence. When the doors opened, she found herself in a simple but elegant waiting area. David Chen appeared a few minutes later. He was a middle-aged man in a dark suit who looked like he had not slept much recently. "Ms. Martinez, thank you for coming. The former president will see you now." He led her down a short hallway to a door marked Private Office. David knocked once and opened the door. Barack Obama was sitting behind a wooden desk wearing a casual shirt and looking more tired than she had ever seen him in photographs. When he stood up to greet her, she noticed he moved carefully, as if he was not entirely steady on his feet. "Ms. Martinez, please have a seat. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Karoline sat down in a chair across from his desk, trying to hide how nervous she felt. This was really happening. She was sitting across from a former president who wanted to talk to her about his health. "I understand you have been investigating some concerns about my medical situation," Obama said, getting straight to the point. "I wanted to speak with you directly before you decide what to do with that information." "Mr. President, I have been trying to be very careful about how I handle this story. I know it involves personal and private matters." Obama nodded appreciatively. "I can see from your questions and approach that you are trying to be responsible about this. That is why I wanted to meet with you face to face." He was quiet for a moment, looking out the window behind his desk. When he turned back to her, his expression was serious but calm. "Karoline, may I call you Karoline? I'm going to tell you something that very few people know. My family and I have been dealing with some health challenges over the past few months." Karoline leaned forward slightly, listening carefully to every word. "I have been experiencing some symptoms that concerned my doctors: memory issues, occasional confusion, some coordination problems. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that we decided I needed thorough medical evaluation." Obama paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "The testing showed that I have the early stages of a neurological condition. It is manageable with proper treatment, but it will require ongoing medical care and some adjustments to my activities." Karoline felt her breath catch. This was exactly what she had suspected, but hearing it confirmed directly from Obama himself made it feel much more real and serious. "The reason I am telling you this," Obama continued, "is because I want you to understand the full situation before you make any decisions about publishing a story." "What would you like me to understand?" Karoline asked softly. "This diagnosis has been devastating for my family. Michelle is worried, my daughters are scared, and we are all trying to figure out how to handle this new reality. We were hoping to have some time to process this privately before dealing with public attention." Obama's voice remained steady, but Karoline could see the emotion in his eyes. This was clearly taking a toll on him and his loved ones. "I also want you to know that this condition does not affect my ability to think clearly or make good decisions. It mainly affects my coordination and sometimes my short-term memory. I am still fully capable of handling my responsibilities and commitments." "What kind of treatment are you receiving?" Karoline asked. "Medication to slow the progression, physical therapy to maintain coordination, and regular monitoring by specialists. The doctors are optimistic that with proper care, I can continue living a full and active life for many years." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments. Karoline was trying to process everything she had just learned. Obama was being completely honest with her about a very personal and difficult situation. "Mr. President, why are you telling me all this? You could have just asked me not to publish the story." Obama smiled slightly. "Because I respect good journalism, and I can tell that you are a good journalist. You found this story through careful investigation, and you have been trying to handle it responsibly. You deserve to have accurate information. But you would prefer that I not publish it right now? I would be grateful if you could give my family some more time to adjust to this diagnosis before it becomes public knowledge. We are not trying to hide it permanently. We just need a little more time to prepare ourselves and figure out how to share this information in a way that is helpful rather than frightening." Karoline understood what he was asking. As a former president, Obama knew that his health situation would eventually become public, but he wanted to control how and when that happened so he could protect his family and provide context for people who might be worried. "How much time are you talking about?" she asked. "A few weeks, maybe a month. Long enough for us to talk to our extended family and close friends, and to work with our doctors on a plan for managing this condition publicly." Obama leaned back in his chair, looking relieved to have shared this burden with someone outside his inner circle. "I also want you to know that I plan to use this experience to help other people who are dealing with similar health challenges. There are millions of Americans facing neurological conditions, and many of them feel scared and alone. If sharing my story can help them feel less isolated and more hopeful, then something good can come from this difficult situation." This was exactly the kind of response Karoline had hoped to hear. Obama was not trying to hide his condition permanently. He was asking for time to handle it thoughtfully and responsibly. What happens if other reporters find out about this before you are ready to make an announcement? Karoline asked. Then we will deal with that situation when it happens, but I am hoping that will not be necessary. They talked for another 20 minutes about various aspects of the situation. Obama answered all of her questions honestly and completely. He explained how the symptoms had developed gradually, how his doctors had diagnosed the condition, and what his treatment plan looked like. When their meeting was ending, Obama stood up and walked around his desk to shake her hand. Karoline, I want to thank you for listening and for considering my family's situation as you make your decision. Whatever you choose to do, I respect your right as a journalist to make that choice. Mr. President, can I ask you one more question? Of course. Are you scared? Obama was quiet for a long moment before answering. Yes, I am scared. Anytime you receive a diagnosis like this, it changes how you think about your future. But I am also determined to handle this with dignity and to use my experience to help other people who are going through similar challenges. Walking to her car, she realized that her decision had become much more complicated. She was no longer just deciding whether to publish information about a public figure's health. She was deciding whether to respect a family's request for privacy during one of the most difficult periods of their lives. At the same time, she could not ignore her responsibilities as a journalist. Obama's health was legitimately newsworthy, and the public had reasons to want accurate information about it. Back at her office, Karoline sat at her desk staring at her computer screen. She had enough information to write a major story that would probably be picked up by news organizations around the world, but she also had a personal request from Obama to wait before publishing it. She decided to call her editor, Robert, and explain the situation. Robert had been in journalism for 30 years and had dealt with ethical dilemmas like this before. Robert, I need your advice on something. I have a big story, but there are some complicated ethical issues involved. She explained everything that had happened, from her initial investigation to her meeting with Obama that afternoon. Robert listened without interrupting. This is a tough one, Karoline. On one hand, Obama's health is clearly newsworthy. On the other hand, he has been completely honest with you and made a reasonable request for some time to handle this privately. What would you do? She asked. I think you need to consider what serves the public interest best. Is there an urgent need for people to know about this right now? Or can waiting a few weeks still serve the public good, while also showing compassion for a family dealing with a health crisis? That night, Karoline went home knowing she had one of the biggest decisions of her career to make. Karoline spent the next 3 days thinking about her conversation with Obama. She kept going back to the look in his eyes when he talked about being scared. This was not just a story about a politician anymore. This was about a human being facing one of life's biggest challenges. She decided to take a different approach than she had originally planned. Instead of rushing to publish everything she knew, she would give Obama and his family some time, while also preparing a story that would be helpful rather than harmful. On Thursday morning, she called David Chen, Obama's communications director. Mr. Chen, I have made a decision about the story. I would like to work with your team to handle this in a way that serves everyone's interests. What did you have in mind? David asked cautiously. I am willing to wait a few weeks before publishing, but I would like to work with you to make sure that when the story does come out, it is accurate and helpful. I want to focus on how the former president is handling this challenge with courage and dignity. There was a pause before David responded. That sounds like a reasonable approach. Let me discuss this with the former president and get back to you. 2 hours later, David called back. The former president would like to meet with you again. Can you come to his office tomorrow morning? The next day, Karoline found herself back in Obama's private office. This time he looked more relaxed and was sitting in a comfortable chair rather than behind his desk. Michelle Obama was also there, which surprised Karoline. Karoline, thank you for coming back, Obama said. Michelle wanted to be part of this conversation because this situation affects our whole family. Michelle smiled warmly and shook Karoline's hand. Thank you for being so thoughtful about how you handle this story. We appreciate that you understand this is not just about politics or news. This is about real people dealing with something very personal. The three of them sat down together and Obama began explaining what they had in mind. We have been talking with our doctors and our family about the best way to share this information publicly. We think it would be most helpful if we can control the timing and the message so people get accurate information instead of rumors and speculation. What kind of timeline are you thinking about? Karoline asked. We would like to make an official announcement in about 3 weeks, Michelle said. That will give us time to talk to our daughters and other family members first. We want them to hear about this from us, not from the news. We would also like to have a plan in place for how to use this experience to help other people, Obama added. There are millions of Americans dealing with neurological conditions and many of them feel scared and alone. If we can show them that it is possible to live a full life with these challenges, that would be meaningful. Karoline understood what they were asking. They wanted to turn a difficult personal situation into something that could help others. This was exactly the kind of story she had hoped to write. Would you be willing to work with me on an article that focuses on your positive approach to handling this diagnosis? She asked. Yes, we would be very interested in that, Michelle replied. We want people to understand that while this is serious, it is not the end of the world. Barack is still the same person, and he still has many years of good work ahead of him. Over the next hour, they discussed how to structure the story. Obama would be open about his diagnosis and symptoms, but the focus would be on his treatment plan and his determination to continue his public service work. Michelle would talk about how their family was adapting to the situation and supporting each other. I also want to make sure people understand that this condition does not affect my ability to think clearly or make good decisions, Obama said. It mainly affects my coordination and sometimes my short-term memory. I'm still fully capable of handling my responsibilities. How do you want to handle the medical details? Karoline asked. We will have our doctors provide accurate information about the condition and the treatment, Michelle explained. We want people to have facts, not speculation or misinformation. They agreed that Karoline would write a comprehensive article that would be published in 3 weeks, after Obama's family had been informed and he had made his official announcement. The story would focus on courage, family support, and hope, rather than fear or sadness. Over the following weeks, Karoline worked closely with the Obama family to prepare the article. She interviewed their doctors about the medical aspects of the condition and the treatment options. She spoke with Michelle about how the family was coping with the diagnosis. She also researched other public figures who had dealt with similar health challenges. The doctors explained that Obama's condition was a form of early-stage neurological disorder that affects coordination and sometimes memory. With proper treatment and lifestyle adjustments, people with this condition could continue living active lives for many years. The key is early detection and proper management, Dr. Martinez, Obama's neurologist, explained to Karoline. The former president caught this condition early, and he is responding well to treatment. His prognosis is very good. Michelle talked about how the family had rallied around Obama after the diagnosis. At first, we were all scared and worried. But then we realized that we could either let this control our lives, or we could take control of it. We chose to fight. She described how they had made small adjustments to their daily routines to accommodate Obama's symptoms. They used reminder systems for appointments and important dates. They made sure Obama got plenty of rest and exercise. They also made sure he had support when he needed it. The most important thing is that we are facing this together as a family, Michelle said. Barack is not going through this alone, and neither are we. Obama himself was remarkably positive about the situation. Obviously, receiving this diagnosis was not easy, but I have been blessed with excellent medical care, a supportive family, and the resources to manage this condition properly. I know that many people dealing with similar challenges do not have these advantages, and I want to use my experience to help them. He explained his plans to work with medical organizations and support groups to raise awareness about neurological conditions. If my story can help even one person feel less alone or more hopeful, then something good will have come from this difficult experience. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Obama held a press conference to announce his diagnosis, publicly. He was calm and confident as he explained his condition and his treatment plan. Michelle stood beside him, showing their united front as a family. "I want to be completely honest with the American people about my health situation," Obama said to the assembled reporters. "I have been diagnosed with a neurological condition that affects my coordination and sometimes my memory. It is manageable with proper treatment, and I am committed to handling this challenge with the same determination I have brought to other difficulties in my life." He went on to explain his treatment plan and his commitment to continuing his public service work. "This diagnosis does not change who I am or what I believe in. It just means I need to make some adjustments to how I do things." The press conference was followed immediately by the publication of Karoline's article. Her story provided detailed context about Obama's diagnosis, his treatment, and his family's response. But the focus was on resilience, hope, and the determination to turn a personal challenge into an opportunity to help others. The article began with a description of Obama's courage in facing his diagnosis head-on. When former President Barack Obama received news that would change his life forever, his first thought was not about himself. It was about how he could use this experience to help other people facing similar challenges. Karoline wrote about her investigation and her meetings with Obama, explaining how she had discovered his condition and how he had chosen to be completely honest with her about it. She described his dignity and grace in dealing with a frightening situation. "This is not a story about decline or defeat," she wrote. "This is a story about a man who refuses to let a medical condition define him or limit his ability to serve others." The article included quotes from medical experts explaining the condition and its treatment. It featured stories from other people who had successfully managed similar diagnoses. It also highlighted Obama's plans to work with advocacy organizations and support groups. "My hope is that by sharing my story, I can help remove some of the fear and stigma that surrounds neurological conditions," Obama was quoted as saying. "These conditions are scary, but they are not the end of the world. With proper care and support, people can continue living meaningful and productive lives." The response to the article and Obama's announcement was overwhelmingly positive. People praised his honesty and courage. Medical organizations thanked him for bringing attention to neurological conditions. Support groups reported increased interest from people seeking help and information. Dr. Peterson, the specialist Karoline had consulted during her investigation, called the article a perfect example of how to handle a sensitive health story responsibly. "This story serves the public interest while also respecting the privacy and dignity of the people involved," he said. "It provides accurate information without sensationalizing the situation." Michelle Obama received hundreds of messages from families dealing with similar challenges, thanking her for showing how to face these situations with strength and unity. "Your story gave us hope," one woman wrote. "My husband was just diagnosed with a similar condition and we were terrified. Seeing how your family is handling this helps us believe we can get through it too." Obama himself seemed energized by the positive response. Within a month of his announcement, he had partnered with 3 major medical organizations to create educational materials about neurological conditions. He also began speaking at support group meetings and medical conferences. "This diagnosis has actually opened up a new area of service for me," he told Karoline in a follow-up interview. "I am learning so much about these conditions and the people who live with them. There is real work to be done here and I am excited to be part of it." Looking back on the entire experience, Karoline felt proud of how she had handled the story. She had uncovered important news through careful investigation, but she had also approached it with compassion and responsibility. "This story taught me that good journalism is not just about getting information quickly," she reflected. "It is about getting it right and presenting it in a way that serves the public interest, while also respecting the humanity of the people involved." The story had a lasting impact on how health stories involving public figures were covered. Other journalists began following Karoline's example of working with families to present medical information in helpful, rather than harmful ways. Obama's openness about his condition also led to increased funding for neurological research and better support services for people with similar diagnoses. His advocacy work became a significant part of his post-presidential legacy. Sometimes the most important stories are not the ones that create shock or controversy, Karoline concluded. Sometimes they are the ones that create understanding, hope, and positive change.